This has been a remarkable week. I had chosen this sermon topic a month or two ago. I had no idea that on last Sunday afternoon I would be doing a memorial service for Ilga Freemanis, who was the mother of Rita Freemanis, who sings in our choir. And while I was still at the reception, I had the news that Harold Barrow, a longtime member of this congregation, died last Sunday at the age of 95, and his service was at Wake Forest on Wednesday. And so death has been my focus this week. And it reminded me of my days when I lived in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and I worked for hospice as a social worker. And shortly after being a social worker at hospice, I had to care for someone myself. It was hard. He was incontinent, unable to chew food, slept a lot, but when I woke up was in distress, could only communicate with helpless eyes and strident cries. And even then, I was guessing most of the time about what he needed. I'm sure glad my son has grown up and he can fix his own darn lunch. But someday the situation may be reversed. He may need to care for me, only he won't see me as a bundle of hope and potential. I will be a shell of myself, a picture of decline and dying. Life is powerful. The spirit of life animates our being. The cry of the newborn is the inhalation of power, combined with the fear of powerlessness. There is little else that a newborn can do but breathe, feed, and sleep. It has little power, but is utterly selfish in using it to survive. And it also has one more power. It is cute and adorable. No matter how we may have grown up, all of us at one time were cute and adorable. When I am dying, the age of being cute and adorable will be decades past. Perhaps there will be a reservoir of love that attracts my son to me. But he will be powerless to stop the inevitable. And he may be torn between his work, his family. He may live far away. But I can give him now the power of knowledge. He already has an idea of what I want. I've already had these conversations with him about end-of-life issues. And he's not even grown, although I think he'll be taller than me by the end of the summer. Death is a part of life and should be discussed naturally and simply. Yet people often avoid this topic, as if pretending that it will never happen makes us immortal. But we will die. In this world of uncertainty, we know one thing: we will die. We do not know when, but we will die. We do not know if it will be suddenly or slowly, but we will die. We do not know the place, but we will die. We do not know how, but we will die. We do not know the precise circumstances, but we will die. There are details beyond our understanding, but we will die. We do not know which of our loved ones will survive us, but I could die right now. For I believed I would die before I heard call and response preaching in a UU service. So many things about death are beyond our control. And that is one of the difficult things about this topic. None of us likes to feel powerless. We have choices that we can make. Ignoring our own death robs us of the power we yet possess. While we are strong, we can prepare for the time when we are weak. While we are strong, we can prepare for the time when we are gone. Now is the time where we have control of our bodies. Power over our bodies, they belong to us. We control the quality of our breathing. Some of us control our breath with yoga breathing and exercising, meditation, focusing as it goes in and out. Some of us can hold our breath underwater. Some of us increase our lung capacity by running. Some decrease their lung capacity by smoking. Some take medication to control their asthma. One day, all of us will stop breathing. Will we want to be resuscitated? It depends. Sometimes during surgery, we are put on a ventilator to help us survive, and then it is removed. In an emergency, a machine may need to breathe for us until the trauma is over. But what if our breathing gets slowly worse and worse? When do we decide to start using oxygen? When do we decide to go on a ventilator? How long do we want to stay once it begins? Christopher Reeves lived on a ventilator for years, for over 10 years. But there came a time when it needed to be removed. He was an optimist, but also a realist. His wife knew when to make the decision because they had talked. When his heart stopped, they removed the ventilator. Our hearts have the power to pump blood, and if they stop, they can be restarted. How many times? Have we thought about this question? Have we talked to anybody about our heart? Before the advances in technology, death was easier to define. Lack of pulse, no breath, dead. But now machines can artificially sustain those functions. And they also look at the brain. Brain death is when they are not able to measure impulses. But brains do not die all at once. Terry Schiavo's brain still functioned when it came to her heart and lungs and digestion. And yet there were no higher thought processes. What defines being alive? What are the qualities that make our lives worth living? It ultimately came down to her choice. She had the power. If she had told her husband she wanted to stay alive at all costs, he should have kept the feeding tube in her. Since she said she did not, he respected her wishes. Now, she would have made it easier on the family if she had written down her wishes. even though her husband had the legal power to make the decision, which was decided over and over and over. Her family doubted he was acting in her interest. And there was much strife in a family that used to love each other openly. Linda Lewis, a chaplain at our local hospice, had an interesting take on the Shivo case. She writes, politicians and legislators, protesters, used religious language in their arguments to save Terry, in spite of the fact that the tubes and the fluids that were providing artificial life for her. The removal of this artificial sustenance was denounced as sinful act and disregard for the value of human life. Where in all of the religious rhetoric is the reasoned voice of spiritual wisdom to remind us that there is a time for all things, a time to be born and a time to die? Is it possible to value the sanctity of life and also to recognize that when it is time to die, there is sacredness in life's ending? Certainly, the sanctity of life is a principle that both religion and law should uphold. Life is valuable. Society needs safeguards to protect human life, especially the most vulnerable. But in our zeal to exalt the sanctity of life to a place of ultimate value, let us not forget that physical life, by its very nature, is fragile and temporary. Life is precious because it is limited. The very thing that makes life sacred is the unexplainable mystery that separates living from dying. How do we make the end of life sacred? First, we must recognize that all of it is valuable. Our death is too important to be ignored. What happens after death is speculation, and so many sages are so certain about their particular belief, and their contradictions are not subject to scientific scrutiny. We cannot know, and we do not have control over afterlife. But we do have power before we die, if we tell people what we want done with our body. First, we need to think about how much we want. How much intervention? There is no wrong answer. Only you can decide what is right for you, and only I can decide what is right for me. And once we've made our decision, we should let others know. Have a conversation. Put it in writing. One such document is a living will. This can help, but it often does not have legal standing. Because a doctor standing with a piece of paper in hand and facing a relative that says they will sue is more likely to side with the relative. Of course, you could tattoo "Do not resuscitate" across your chest and leave the phone number of your lawyer. But another problem with the written document is that we cannot predict everything that might happen to us. If I get electrocuted, I may want to be resuscitated and placed on a ventilator until I can breathe again. If I'm dying of multiple sclerosis, I might make a different choice. If I just write, "Do not bring me back from the dead," my wishes, my true wishes, might not be granted. It is best to designate a person with durable power of attorney for health care. Choose someone you trust, someone who understands your wishes, someone who will carry them through. This may be a family member. It may not be. You know the state of your family. You know who you need to choose. And then after you choose someone, put it in writing. Tell everyone. If you let your wishes be known, it is a gift to those you love. You save them from speculation and guilt. And you save your power of attorney from having to convince others that they are doing what you indeed wish. And the stakes are even higher if you are gay or lesbian. The power of attorney may be the only thing that allows you to see your loved one while they are in the hospital. And there are state legislators that are trying to unwrite these laws, even as we speak, outlawing all contracts between same-sex couples. But we need to emphasize justice for all, because the power of attorney helps people have power over their own life without the intervention of church or state. After service today, there will be an opportunity to help document your desire. Kavio and John Motzinger, who have worked a lot in this area, will help start those conversations. In your order of service, many of you have a life crisis form. This is a form we have at the church. We give it to people when they join as members. And believe it or not, we get a higher return of pledge cards than we get of the life crisis forms. But it's a type of conversation that we need to have with each other. It lets me know if someone's in the hospital, I can look at what their life crisis form is, and I can have the conversation with their family. If they haven't had it with their family, they've at least put something down that indicates where things are. Because if they have a living will but nobody knows where it is, it's not going to do any good. And so, due to the state of our copier, only some of you have those in your inserts. So how many people have them? Okay. Now, if you have them and have already filled them out, there's two options. Share them with someone who didn't raise their hand. And also, Lucy Kaplan has copies of the new form, which also has more questions to help you go, oh, do I really know what I want? Because sometimes it's hard to write down what you want if you haven't thought about it yet. So please take advantage of these opportunities that are available today. But life is more than the physical. Besides the living will, I think we're all familiar with the last will and testament, that money and property are a way to preserve your power. And I don't mean in that crass way of you better be nice to me and I'll cut you out of my will. But back to what is money? Money is something that we receive for exerting our energy. It is a symbol, a representative of our energy, of what we value. And our energy manifests itself in many ways, of what we do to get money, and also how we spend that money. Is one way we determine what we value. The type of house, our car, our clothes, the food we eat have a ripple effect on the world, and those ripples extend even after our life. As we continue to help people and institutions with our wealth, it is a way to fund our ideas and hopes. But money is a fickle thing. It often does not last. It comes in slow and moves out fast, depending on how we define life's necessities. But our ideas and our affections and our beliefs are true wealth. And I know John and Kaveh will be talking about something called an ethical will as well. When we are having these conversations with our loved ones about death, we should also take the time to share our ideas about life. I knew a 29-year-old woman with terminal cancer who made a videotape for her then 3-year-old daughter. The daughter must be around 20 years old now. And I bet you that $2 videotape is more precious than any insurance money she may have received. But why wait until our deathbeds to tell others we love them? The woman at 29 had little choice, because who expects to be on their deathbed at 29? But we have been granted time. But we don't know how much. So now is a good time. Our immortality is gained when we seek out those eternal principles. Our immortality is passed on to future generations when we share those principles with others. So let us find what we value most and live and die accordingly. I know my experience on this issue is only my experience, and I know in this congregation there are many doctors, and I know there are many people who have cared for their parents, people who have lost a child. By talking with each other about all the things that might happen and all the ways that we manage to survive, our experiences strengthen each other when shared. So I just open it up now to anyone who has worked with these issues, or if you're thinking about it for the first time today, to stand up and let your ideas be known.
offer a suggestion for people to look into something called a family trust, but be aware that many lawyers do not even know about a family trust. Make sure you find somebody who does know about it. A family trust enables you to pass on all of your worldly goods, including your money, with no monetary payment by the remaining family members to process your desires, so they don't lose any money at all. And I'm no lawyer, so I can't give you all the details, but I know that my husband and I have a family trust in place, and we have a daughter who will take over for us. If you are interested, check it.
Sherry.
Just to add a little bit about what was said in the beginning, I can tell you as a nurse, if you have a living will and you have a doctor, primary care doctor that you have an excellent relationship with, and that physician is aware of your wishes, be aware that in today's healthcare system, your primary physician probably does not have admitting privileges any longer at the local hospital. When you get admitted to the hospital, you will be followed by what's called a hospitalist, who doesn't know you from Adam, which is one of the reasons why this type of thing is so important, why it's so important to have a loved one who does understand what your wishes are, who does have it and can communicate to that hospitalist, because your primary doctor that you have that relationship with on the outside of the hospital will not be involved in your care once you are admitted.
What she said, I was caring for my grandfather, and he had a DNR, and he died in my living room, and the EMT came and I explained to them, and by law, they had to try and resuscitate. The doctor had a copy of his DNR, I did not. And so we tried desperately to get the doctor on the phone, and the doctor was not on call, so they would not get him. You had to deal with the doctor who was on call. And so they tried to resuscitate him, took him to the hospital, and did a bunch of stuff to resuscitate him, and he was dead. And it's just, you need a copy of it in your hands at all times, or else you will go through the red tape, and that makes it much harder.
Two separate things. One, I dealt with my mother's death, and we had talked about it long before. I had conversations when I was a kid with my parents about what their feelings were. And it removes a lot of the guilt about making the decisions. You've made the decisions prior to the event, and it just makes the dying that level easier. It's never easy, but at least there's no guilt about the decisions you make. The other thing is, when you travel, take a copy of your living will and healthcare power of attorney with you. If it, because you may not be able to get in touch with somebody back at your home. So always have a copy with you when you travel.
Charlie, as a life member of the Hemlock Society, which changed its name several times, I believe it's not a choice in dying or something. Just let me remind everybody that we can choose the moment ourselves if we're brave enough and have the right equipment and the right people supporting us. I know this is a hard choice, and certainly one doesn't want to have to make ever, but sometimes in dying, our pets are treated better than we are.
Yes.
Hi, I come from a state, Connecticut, where it's just a living will. In North Carolina, unfortunately, it's very clear. I have a healthcare advocate here. I have a living will which very clearly specifies exactly what I want and what I don't want, thanks to John Monsinger. And because I live alone and I do not have a blood relative in the state, my will is filed with the clerk of New York downtown. And my niece
North Carolina now has a registry accessible via the web, which is where these can be filed, and you just need to go to the Secretary of State's website, and you can file that, and if you carry a blue card with you, anybody, anywhere who has access to the web, can see your living will and your healthcare card.
Well, I know we could have this conversation forever, and we should continue with it. But continue with it with those people who are not present here as well. Let us now turn and rise as we are able and sing, "I Am That Great and Fiery Force," number 27.